Welcome to Classrooms and Jail Cells, where we dive beneath the surface of education policy to hear the voices that shape our schools and the students whose future hang in the balance. I'm Uriel, and this season we are unpacking the school-to-prison pipeline, not through statistics alone, but through stories, through truth-telling, through listening. In this first episode, we're joined by someone who stands at the front lines of that very pipeline, not as a passive observer, but as a gatekeeper of possibility. Today's guest is Molly Hollenbeck, a principal, a leader, an advocate who navigates the tension between policy and compassion every single day. We'll explore how disciplined decisions often made in seconds can shape a student's entire trajectory. We'll talk about zero tolerance policies, restorative practices, and what it really means to lead a school where every child is seen. Because behind every referral slip and suspension notice is a young person asking, am I safe here? Do I belong here? Does someone believe in me? Let's listen to what leadership looks like when the goal isn't just control, but care. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning. Yeah.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. So let's dive in. So, first question, can you tell the listeners a bit about your journey in education and what led you to become a principal?
Yeah, well, I thought your lead-in was great. I was like, gosh, you just described my job perfectly, that the line between policy and compassion. So I'm looking forward to just going through these questions with you this morning. But I've spent the majority of my career in education in special education. I was a licensed special education teacher. And before that, I started out as a paraprofessional. And I think my passion in school has always been in supporting students who probably needed schools to look different, and yet schools continue to look the same way. So I worked primarily with students' emotional behavior disorder, so a lot of externalizing behavior in school, communicating something about the environment that wasn't meeting the need of the student. And then my job was always to support the students, to help them find their own voice, to advocate for what they needed in school. So that was my background primarily. I spent some time in district leadership positions in special education, but always knew that what I believed the role of a building leader was to essentially do what I was doing as a special education teacher, but doing that at a school-wide level, which is to say, what does each student here need? Not everybody learns the same way. Some kids require more time than others. They have skill levels that are all different. And I just knew that principal position was a position that I probably could leverage the background and experience that I'd been using in the classroom at a broader scale. And plus, like, the principal position is just, it's a cool position. It's the best and hardest thing I've ever done.
No, that's good. Yeah. And how long have you been a principal for?
I just finished my third year. I was an assistant principal for 7 years, and then I just finished my third as principal.
And how was that?
I'm tired. I'm tired. And, I think everything in education post-COVID, it's true, right? I think the political climate in this country is unlike anything we've ever seen post-COVID. So I don't know, social media, phones, youth having access to weapons in a way, like there's just a lot more, I would say, complexity in the lives of youth, and they have to navigate a lot of things that I didn't see from youth when I was in the classroom. And so while being a principal is incredibly rewarding, when you say, am I safe? Do I belong? And does somebody believe in me? Like, that comes as a principal with a significant burden.
Right.
Like, leadership is a burden. And I feel every day that sense of responsibility, ensuring safety and belonging. And then also knowing that, kids know that we believe in them. So it's great, and it's hard.
No, yeah, it's a struggle sometimes. How would you describe the community your school serves?
Yeah, so we are a high school, a 9 through 12 high school, comprehensive, about 1,700 students. There are 44 languages spoken in the hallways of our community. So we are predominantly a Black and Brown community. Our largest student body, 40% of our students are Latina students. Spanish speaking would be our largest community of families, would be Spanish speaking community. I would say we have a significant percentage of students who are new to our country learning English as a second language. And I would say the diversity within that group is becoming more diverse. We've got kids from all across South America, Africa, Southeast Asia. We just have a large, diverse group of diversity. And I would say that the thing about this community is it's the first school in which I've worked in which when you walk our halls, it's not only do you hear, different languages, it's a multilingual community, but there's almost so much difference that difference doesn't stand out in pockets because it's all just a it's 1,700 kids and it's a big place of diversity, it's great. And there comes some challenges with that.
Yeah. And which kind of leads into the next question. What are some of the unique challenges and strengths you've observed in your students?
I would say I think it's a challenge and a strength is within all those cultures. So while there's a lot of groupness in culture, there's also a lot of diversity across culture, right? So because you are a Spanish speaking Latino, there's some things that you would have in common with others who share your culture. But there's a lot of diversity in that depending on region that you come from, where maybe your background and family history is. And so I think while the strength of our community is its diversity, we are also seeing within that diversity, I would say, some groups that maybe are learning, this is how my culture operates and that's how your culture operates. And we don't know each other very well, and we might not like each other until we get to know each other. And so I think just being really, really intentional about getting to know the individual student, getting to know their family, their family's background, what they value, and then how what people value might be at odds with what other people value, and not losing sight of that, but making that all work within these old brick hallways and buildings. It's beautiful, and it can be messy and hard at the same time.
Yeah. And sort of kind of going into that, what do you love the most about your school? And what challenges keep you up at night the most?
Oh, well, what I love the most is, so I am a middle-aged white woman, right? Blonde hair, blue eyes. Um, I was well into my 30s before I experienced the diversity that I'm watching 14 through 18-year-old students experience in this community. So when you sit in an auditorium at graduation after waiting to graduate from this community, you're so ready for a global, diverse world in a way that I think a ton of adults in this country, white or not, didn't get to experience. And so I think like what I love the most is just the ways in which kids get to see and experience difference while they're in high school. I love that. And they're just like cool, awesome kids who are fun to be around. They're great. They're like the best group of kids I've ever been around. Probably biased, but I believe that. And, I've been in multiple places, and they're kind and they're humble, and they're just cool. They're cool humans. The thing that keeps me up at night, I mean, truthfully, is a couple things keep me up at night. One really is the overwhelming responsibility to keep our staff and our students safe in school. Like, it's just a thing. Changes in federal government and policies, and what I don't have to think about like coming into a place where people know I'm coming. Am I safe? Like, I think immigration issues for a predominant group of our community, like that keeps me up at night. Am I over simplifying? We're safe. It's safe here. You can be safe. Because I don't experience that in my own humanity. I worry about what does it really look like to families who don't experience safety in the same way. So that keeps me up at night. I would say youth, and I mean, in a sad way, there's access to weapons in a way in schools that is different. Big, large gatherings of youth at high school events are not safe events anymore across our region. And so that keeps me up at night. Like, just what if and when, and are we doing enough to like really get to know each kid and notice changes in behaviors and patterns? And that keeps me up probably. And like, in a weird way, I just really care about educators. I care about teachers. I care about all staff that work in schools. And while it isn't, I know, my responsibility to make people happy, I do feel a sense of responsibility to like create conditions in our school community that people want to keep working here. And so, I don't know, I think like leadership's a burden, and sometimes that is a heavy burden. And I don't know. And I also sleep well. So it's like I get up really early. So like it doesn't keep me awake totally. But if I wake up, it's often about safety.
But I think you overall as a principal, you do a really good job. Like, you're always out in the hallways. It's like you're not always locked in your office. You're always like, or like during passing time, you're always like you're talking to students. They feel like they belong here just because you are out in the hall, which is very important to like point out, right? Because like not a lot of principals are like that. They tend to lock themselves away, and it's like they only go out when they have to. But like you choose to go out there, you choose to interact with your students, which is really good.
I know. I appreciate that. I was with a principal the other day who said their goal for the upcoming year was to get out of their office more. And I said, huh, my goal might be to get in my office more to actually get some work done. I don't know what that's like. I feel like when I'm here and the kids are here, I just want to be out around the kids. I want to be out around our staff. That's where I feel like the biggest impact of this job is. And I probably got some office things to, to do too. I got to do a better job of that. But
But yeah, well, that wraps up our first segment, which I call personal journey and school context.
okay.
The next segment we'll be diving into is discipline, philosophy, and zero tolerance. So, which leads me into what is your philosophy when it comes to student discipline?
Yeah. So I would say it is a non-exclusionary response to student behavior. I would say it's about teaching skills when students are externalizing behavior, they're showing a need, and they're missing a skill. And so I think it sits in a non-exclusionary restorative mindset. I think there is a accountability in I'm going to hold you accountable to learning a different skill or making a different choice, not in like, I'm going to hold you accountable and make this hurt for you. But I think like there's an accountability to like, you're not the strategy you're choosing to meet your need is doing harm either to someone else or to our community. And so the accountability comes in that self accountability of like, what are other choices you could make? And how do we help you learn different choices and hold you accountable to making better choices that do less harm? And if harm was done, how do we help you repair harm?
Right. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, because I remember as a student here, they're like the school policies were a lot different than what they are now.
Yeah, can I ask you,
Yes.
like, what? Yeah, you were here. How was it different?
It was a lot. I feel like it was super different. Like I remember when I first started here, I expected those same policies were in place, so I already had in mind what it was gonna be like. But walking in, it was different, right? I remember my time as a student, like it was like you get in trouble, it was automatically to the dean's office or to whoever, and a lot of the time it resulted in either in school suspension or ISS or just out of school suspension. And that happened to me one time, like my sophomore year of high school, I got suspended for getting in a fight. But mind you, I wasn't the one who started it. I wasn't the one who I was technically the victim in here, and I was the one who ended up being punished as well. And me and my family found that super unfair. I was like, they came from behind, they attacked me. I got up. That's when the administrators came in. We both got in school suspension, and I was like, why am I getting punished like for someone else's actions, right? Um, and so that's how it was throughout high school. And obviously, like I avoided getting into fights or getting in trouble in general. Um, and yeah, so that's how it was overall. They used a lot of exclusionary practices. And as a high schooler, I thought that as a student, I didn't think much of it. It was like, oh, it's just a regular way to go, right? Until I started my undergrad program when I was introduced to school to prison pipeline and exclusionary practice, I was like, oh, well, okay, now this makes a lot more sense, right? So as undergrads continue, I kind of, you know, did a little more research with this topic, and that's where it leads me here today.
Yeah, I mean uh, the roots of exclusionary discipline in schools probably goes back to the creation and foundation of schools, which is, I mean, the push out mentality and the practices and the policies are all designed to keep kids out of school, really to keep kids out of school. And we know who that impacts at a higher level, Black and brown kids whose schools weren't designed for to begin with. So
Right.
something in my environment doesn't feel good. I don't maybe have the skills and the ability to communicate that yet. And so I act out in a certain way, and the pattern and the routine response of just like 1 day, 3 day, 5 day, like where did we ever learn? I mean, what does that even mean? What does
Right.
3 days mean? What is magic about 3 days? And so, we've gotten super intentional through non-exclusionary discipline practices around like let's take that situation. If I was the principal and you were in the hallway and somebody came up behind you, we would be in my office looking at cameras, and would any reasonable person expect that if somebody was jumped from the back and somebody started getting physical, that you wouldn't respond in a
Right.
physical way? And so like, what do you need as a result of that versus you all get 5 days or you all get 3 days? Like that's a mindless way of looking at, I think, what students need, what they're communicating, and then like, right, what that does to your mental health,
Right.
to your wellness, to your feeling and sense of belonging. Do you feel like you'll belong in a school in which the response is we're going to look at you exactly the same way as two kids and just say you both get the same thing. Like that doesn't build trust. That doesn't build, I think, a sense of belonging. And it doesn't even make sense.
Right. Yes. Yeah, and that was also throughout classroom, like disruptive behavior out, and they would call security, right? And it's like they wouldn't come back until the following day. Um, and so that was always a problem. It's like even as soon as you realize, like, wow, like there's so much that people are missing out on just for being absent, right? And so kind of like what I also do within my classroom, like if a kid is being disruptive because like there's something going on, right?
Right.
And it's not always something that happens in school. A lot of times it also happens because they're bringing it from home, right? So I kind of noticed what helps a lot with my students taking a lap around the floor, right? So like if they're being disruptive or they just can't focus, like yeah, like go take a lap, gather yourself. Once you're ready, like come back, and then just make sure that they're caught up with or they're keeping up with whatever's happening in the classroom too has been helpful.
And what I love about that as a principal who hears what I hear in there is a teacher who sees each student and knows, okay, this student doesn't have something today. Something's going on. There's something's different. That doesn't mean I'm going to exclude you, right? And you can't be in here for the next 45 minutes, but I am going to communicate that I see you. When you're in here, I need you to be a part of this community because we're better when you're here and when you're engaged. But as a teacher, I'm going to take care of that, give you a strategy, but I want you a part of my community. I appreciate that as a principal to hear that.
As either an educator, an assistant principal, even as a principal, have you ever had to implement zero tolerance policies? And if so, how did that sit with your values?
Yeah, well, I'm looking at a post-it of our principal team. We have our values taped to the table, and I'm looking at community, equity, growth, service, and joy are my values. And I think anytime anything's exclusionary, it goes against equity, it goes against community, it goes against joy and growth. And I would say I have been a part as a principal of one situation. That was a pretty sad one. My first year, I was probably a little in over my head, but there was um, a, a violent incident at a football game that carried over into school. There was a weapon involved in that in our community, and that was you're not able to be in our community right now because of that. So that is the time when it's been like, according to policy. And I think there's some questions coming up about policy. Policy and practices are two different things, but it is the one time where I was like, I remember pulling out the policy. I remember reading the policy, and I remember being in a conversation with the family. And I knew what I was like. I knew it was an exclusionary move that was going to impact that kid's life. And it was the one time where I was like, not at this time, not right now, not with this. And so it didn't sit with my values. I think to this day, like I'm not comfortable talking about it. And I think most people would be like, and that's okay. I don't know if that's okay, but it was the one. It's the one.
The one. Yeah. Huh. No, yeah. I feel like even as like throughout high school, I remember, or my freshman year of high school, I remember students from Richfield High School came here to Kennedy, and this fight broke out like first thing in the morning. Like it was during breakfast, so it was way before school started. And I remember a lot of students did get punished because like they intervened. Not only students but also administrators got hurt. I remember chair was thrown at an administrator, right? And so that was like, as a student, yeah, like oh yeah, they should be punished, right? Like bodily harm was caused, right? So I'd like as soon as like oh yeah, like suspension. Even like I would, yeah, as a student I would say like yeah, expel would seem adequate. Like they hurt someone who and like who got hurt, and it's like yeah, I feel like that severe punishment as a student is like yeah, that should apply to them. But like now as a teacher, it's like well, like yes, but like no, but like where do we go from here?
And I think it's, the balance of keeping a school community safe. I mean, I think having staff feel like you are going to know when you send a kid into my classroom who you might know has some tendencies where harm may be done in this environment. Like I think the most important thing between an administrative team, deans and assistant principals and a principal is the line of communication to the classroom teacher of the continued work with the student to help them learn skills and grow having frequent check-ins, but also then, making sure a teacher knows, here's some things you need to know, not through the lens of being afraid, but like I think when teachers have information and teachers know what kids are working on, they do a lot with that. It's when they don't have that information and it's kind of we don't want teachers to know, like, this kid may be a kid who in the past has demonstrated some ability to get into some physical fights. I think there's a way to not let that be that whole kid's persona, but
Right.
also here's some things that kid needs, and here's some signs for you to look for. Like, okay, then we're all working together to support a kid to keep them close to the learning environment in, I believe, a restorative way. And making sure the teacher, like, what do you need?
Mhm.
What skills do you need? What support do you need? Because that child is going to be in your classroom.
Yes. Yes, and this is something too that we'll be talking more about in episode 2, like the labeling of students, right? Like if they're labeled a troubled child, right? A lot of people will have that. That's how they will know that student. Like, oh, this kid is troubled. I have to keep an eye on this person. And it's like
Right.
there's more that makes up who this person is.
I think having spent my entire career in special education, I was always torn between, like, emotional behavior disorder. It's not even a disability. It's a label that gets you, I would say to the kids, like, that label gets you time with me in school. Aren't you lucky? Like, that's what it got. It's not, you don't leave school and have EBD. It's not your identity. It's not who you are. It provides you a space in a building that maybe other kids don't have access to. So you get something special, actually. But I think the line for me is always like, I want to know some things because I don't want to go blind into some things.
Hmm.
And knowing things doesn't mean I've defined you by what I know about you. So, like, I don't know. That's a tricky one. And it's real, the balance between not letting 3 letters or numbers or some label define your humanity, but also making sure that staff and teachers in buildings, like, know, here's how these are the current strategies this child uses, and they're not the best ones because they do harm, and we're working to build and make sure they have different ones.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. How do you distinguish between behaviors that call for accountability versus those that signal a student needs support?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this, right? Like, I think all behavior, I think the accountability is self accountability and other accountability to your community, accountability to others. Like, you may have made a choice. So I think all behavior shows a sign for support. I think all behaviors do call for accountability. Um, and that comes through reflection, that comes through self awareness, that comes through learning a different way. And so I think I don't know if I distinguish between those two things. I just think all behaviors are saying, I need something, are communicating, I need something. And I don't think schools have done a good job of helping a kid identify the skill they need to learn or the choice they need to make that's different. And here we're working really hard to help kids. We call it a intent and an impact map. Like, when you make a choice that harms someone else or our community, your responsibility and accountability to what you've done is to understand the impact you've had on yourself, on others, and the community, and then identify steps to repair and restore that. So I think it's just having the language. I think it's understanding non-exclusionary discipline. I think it's understanding what it means to do work in a restorative way. And so I think those things help you um, distinguish behaviors.
Yeah, sounds good. In your experience, how have disciplinary policies contributed intentionally or not, pushing students out of school?
Well, they've directly contributed, I believe. I think one, through a couple questions ago, you asked about zero tolerance. I would say in my time in leadership in schools, policies have gotten broader where they can. Like, our student code of conduct and discipline policy essentially says, for any behavior, you could go from a conversation with somebody, the teacher in the classroom, all the way to expulsion from school. So the list is A through P. I actually think there's like that many responses to a behavior.
Hmm.
I appreciate that because it doesn't say if this, then this. A lot of handbooks, a lot of student handbooks, like if you did a deep dive in school district handbooks, you'd see 1, 3, 5, 3, 5, 10. And we don't have that for the very reason you described, which is when there's conflict. I don't believe conflict fits in a grid, in a matrix. And so I think when you have those matrices and grids, then you get to exclusion of Black and brown students in schools because of behavior, because schools aren't healing. I don't get to say that as a white woman. My experience with majority Black and brown kids in school is it's not a healing place. It's not a place of safety. It's not a place that like just innate belonging isn't just given and granted. And so I think when I don't feel comfortable in a place, I react in a way. If I don't see myself as part of this community, I don't maybe care if I harm this community because this isn't my community, Miss Hollenbeck. Like your community doesn't feel like it's mine. And so I think, the policy of zero tolerance or the policy of you have to do what your handbook says. Every school district needs to have a handbook. And if you choose in your handbook to automatically say first fight 3, second fight 5, third fight 10, and we know that our data shows us that our Black students say are going to fight more, which is true here right now. That would be what we would see in our data. If we are just going to a formula, then we're supporting exclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Versus why are Black students in this community choosing that response? What do they need to learn to make a different choice that doesn't result? So it's flipping that question in a lot of school districts, and leaders want to talk about the response versus the tier 1, what do they need and where does that teaching happen? Our kids here, and I can only speak to them about them, they don't know how to handle conflict very well. They don't know how to navigate what happens over the weekend on social media. They come in ready to find their strategy is I'm going to find that person, I'm going to start yelling, and we're going to go. And like we know now that we have to teach them something different because that's the strategy they're showing us that they have.
Right.
I'm going to go find you and I'm going to yell at you. And if I don't like what I'm hearing from you, I'm going to start fighting you. And so they have to learn something different, a different response. And it's our job to teach them that, not expect that they're just going to make a different choice.
Right. Yeah, it kind of brings up like this. I had this student who like there was this other person who was talking about them on social media over the weekend. I remember I saw her on a Monday, and she's like, "Oh, when I see her in the hallways, like I'm a fighter. Like I'm gonna tell I'm gonna tell her things, and I'm a fighter." And I'm like, "Well, why though? Like, what do you get out of it?" And she's like, "Well, she needs to know her place and this and that." And I was like, "Yes, but like I see where you're coming from, but like no, this isn't the right way to go. Like you're gonna be the one who gets in trouble because it's you who acted upon these actions, right? So like you're not really winning in this situation." And so she was like, "Yeah, but still, she needs to know that who I am and who she's talking about on social media is not who I am." And I was like, "Yes, but like the people you know who you are, right? Like don't let this one person who barely knows you tell you a whole different story. And at the end, you prove her who you are by fighting her, right? Like you don't win in this situation." And it's like it's crazy because a lot of students do refer to go to fighting as a way to show who they are.
I've had kids say to me, you seem stressed when that happens. And Miss Hollenbeck, like, it's not a big deal. Like, you're never going to stop fights in schools. And I don't hold that fundamental belief. I hold a belief that schools can be a healing community. I wish we could take it all down and rebuild it in a space and create a space with students in mind, truly students in mind. But we're not there. And I don't know that that's going to happen in my lifetime. And I believe that we can create relationships and community in this space and that we can help kids learn different skills. Like, I feel like if I lose that belief, then I might as well be done.
Are there moments you've witnessed where a harsh disciplinary action felt like it closed doors for a student?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you serve a suspension to a student, and we do, and we have, and we've asked ourselves, could we imagine school without out of school suspension? Like, could we actually envision it? Could we actually do it? And I would say harsh disciplinary action, to me, the definition of that is suspension, because you are essentially saying you're not a part of our community and you need to go and be away. And we can justify, well, we need time to respond, and they've done too much harm, and staff have gotten hurt, and you cannot be here and do that. And sending a kid out, I believe, is it's like you don't belong here today. That doesn't mean you don't belong tomorrow, but right now, today, we're essentially saying you don't belong here. Mm-hmm. And I believe every time you do that, you're closing a door, or you're closing the door, right? Like maybe it's not totally slammed shut, because we'll welcome you back, and we're going to help you make different choices and learn new skills. But I just think out of school suspension is a harsh disciplinary response that we've justified in schools, that like it has to be, there has to be a place in schools for out of school suspension. And I'm a principal who uses that. And so like, I'm fully aware that that is a choice that closes doors for kids. And I haven't yet gotten to a place where we know how to operate school fully without that as one of the responses that we have. We use it less, but we still use it.
Yes. And then the last question of the segment. In your opinion, how do these disciplinary trends disproportionately affect marginalized students, such as Black and Brown youth or neurodivergent students?
One of the things that we do, I hold myself, speaking of accountability, hold myself accountable to with our leadership team, is we look at out of school suspension data proportionate to percentage of students in the building. And so we look at that through the lens of, are you a student who accesses services through an IEP? What demographic are you? Are you a multilingual learner? All of our ways in which we in schools group students for better or for worse, and it's often for worse. We see that our Black students are disproportionately out of school suspended based on the population that they hold in school. The group, our Black students and students who are served through IEPs, receive out of school suspensions at a disproportionate rate. All other student groups are not disproportionate in their out of school suspensions. So we have some questions to ask of ourselves of, we watch it every month. We make the data, just like in the classroom. We can talk all we want about the kids, but at the end of the day, you grade. You create the assignments, you create the grading structure, you grade. So every adult in this building creates an achievement gap. There's never one at the start of a trimester. There's never one at the start of the year. We make it, the adults make it. So if we can make it, we also can unmake it. Mm-hmm. And so, that's our work, is to sit and look at each other and say, okay, the month of February, it gets real hard in schools in February. Do we get tired? Are we making sloppy decisions? How do we continue to hold ourselves accountable and ask ourselves the hard question of, what role is race playing in our decision right now? Why are we continuing to see our Black students show up in our dean spaces? Why are we continuing to see them in conflict in our hallways? And so what do we need to do different to get ourselves out of the, not just how do we respond, but what needs to look different for our students to see themselves as a stronger part of this community?
Yeah. Oh, really good.
And it's hard.
Yeah.
And it's hard. I mean, it's like schools, we are, one of the things, I'll give you an example, like this school year, we're reading this book, Reducing Stress in Schools. This was one of our summer book reads. And in it, there's something called the emergency response kit for students. But it's essentially teaching across your school community, all students and adults, by the way, who need it just as much. But how do you start to teach kids to notice what they're feeling, notice the strength of what they're feeling, know that they have choices, and then helping them make a choice, a healthier choice than maybe what they're choosing. And so I think what we don't do in schools is we say, oh, you're mad. Okay, well, right now kids know if I'm mad, I'm going to go fight that person. Mm-hmm. Are you mad? How mad are you? Like on a scale of 1 to 10, are you like 10 mad? Because we got to get you somewhere and get you somewhere safe. But if you're like 2 mad, you're going to go through a lot of your life, like probably you were probably 2 mad in traffic this morning.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, yeah. But I think to help kids start to regulate and know the strength of an emotion is a miss for us. And so like we are thinking about, how do we disrupt disproportionate trends that are marginalizing Black and right now our Black students specifically, then we got to teach them something. And so, how do we design something that allows for opportunities for learning and connection at a different level? So, we're working on that this summer for this very purpose, to try to see those trends go down. But you can't work on that if you don't know what your trends are. So, we're real intentional with our data, and we know that.
Right, yeah, that's good. No, that's good. So yeah, that wraps up our second segment. So going into our third one, restorative practices and resistance. So I know at the school you're at right now, you have implemented restorative practices. Have you ever been at a school where those practices were not implemented and sort of transitioned into that, or is there an example of that?
Yeah, I mean, both of the schools I was at before this, restorative practices was not anything that we talked about, and it wasn't here when I started. It came about here. So all without restorative practices, the conversation was always around behavior response, behavior response, behavior response. What's in the handbook? Change the handbook, make a matrix. When we started talking about restorative practices here, we knew we had to do learning. And how we got to restorative practices is we actually, when I started as principal, there were almost, in the years leading into COVID and coming out, there were almost over 800 days of out of school suspension here. That is wild. That is wild to think about the learning loss at a time in which learning was already lost. What were we communicating to kids about being a part of a school community? And so, but I knew that I needed to learn as a building principal. And I think this will come up in maybe some of the questions coming up. But people talk about restorative practices like it's just something you do, like just do that. Well, everything that we just talked about is everything is set in schools for exclusionary discipline. So when you talk about undoing that, you're essentially talking about starting to pull apart the entire fabric of how a school and school systems were created. Even if we know they're harmful, the exclusionary practices are really, really deep. And so I knew I had to learn to keep it local and immediate about me. I didn't know how to lead a restorative school. I didn't know what that meant. So we wrote a grant through the Minnesota Department of Education. We spent 2 years learning with MDE around restorative practices. We went every month for 2 years and started to slowly embed and implement restorative practices within our community. But it wasn't like we just turned on a switch and we're like, oh, we're doing restorative practices now. Like we didn't even know what that meant.
Right, it takes time.
It takes time. It takes time.
Yes. And then what impacts have you seen from these approaches compared to traditional discipline?
Yeah, well, we've reduced our out of school suspensions by over 50% in the last 3 years. We know that data point. We've gained over 5,000 minutes of instructional time. So when you just look at like excluding kids from school, we know that they're losing learning. So we know we've gained back instructional time. We've seen our graduation rate continue to increase almost 4% over the last 3 years. So we know that keeping kids in school, even when they've made a harmful choice, is resulting in higher levels of learning for all kids, but specifically for Black and Brown kids.
Yes. And then could you share a story where a student was supported through conflict resolution rather than punishment?
Like almost every day. And I genuinely mean this, but we have our deans, our assistant principals, myself, our student advocates. When there is conflict, we try to, one, be as proactive as possible to get ahead of it. We try to connect a student with an adult that they have a really good relationship. And we're lucky with counselors and advocates and deans. We've got a myriad of staff that kids can identify as the person who's going to give them the highest level of support, a case manager, a social worker. So we do some individual processing with a kid. And then when ready, we don't make kids do this, but we bring them together in circle. We have a restorative calming room that's set up for conflict resolution. And so then we'll bring them together and we'll uphold the values of being in a restorative circle, and we'll have that facilitated by one of our adults. And I think for kids to experience being in a circle and hearing what you have to say, you hear what I have to say. We've both had our individual time to process, and we can look at each other and say like, hey, my bad, bruh. Like, I didn't
Right.
mean that. And like, we're at the end of the day, a lot of kids in conflict in schools are actually friends, or they used to be friends. And so to sit across from somebody in a circle and be like, I actually kind of miss you, or I didn't mean that, or maybe we're not going to be friends in the same way, but we're going to be able to both be in this community together, has been really, really powerful to watch. And so we have that happening, I would say for sure weekly, in our restorative calming space where we're bringing kids together. And
That's
so
good.
like, instead of, if we can keep them here, we'll even do, instead of in school suspension all day, we do something called time-based response time. So like, you had a thing, do you need all day? Because that's just fictitious, right? Like
Right.
we've just said, you must need one day. What if you only needed 2 class periods and you've restored something and you're ready to go on with your learning? Our goal is to try to get kids back to the learning environment when conflict is resolved as quickly as possible.
No, that's good. Yes. So that wraps up our third segment and kind of leading to a fourth one, leading through tension. What do you wish policymakers or administrators understood about discipline from your vantage point as a principal?
That it is that undoing the ways schools have historically operated takes time. It takes learning and unlearning. Every one of us, and probably every one of our families, especially our parents, grew up in institutions in which suspension was the basis for the response to behavior. So even the families who are like, is that other kid going to be suspended? I want that other kid out of your school. That kid needs to get kicked out of school. It is so deeply ingrained. So what I would want policymakers or administrators to understand, it's like this is a new learning. Like, you have to unlearn exclusionary discipline because it is hardwired in society, in legislators. You hear it, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
people need to be held accountable. That's rooted in exclusionary practices of something has to hurt when harm is done, and to completely shift. Even for me, sometimes I wonder, like, are we, should we be suspending a little bit? Like, even for me, 3 years into this learning and this work, it creeps back in about like, maybe we should be suspending more. And you're bringing that up. You're still referring to what it felt like or what happened to you here. And I'm still like it's a little bit like trying to get out to the ocean over the crashing waves. Like, I continue to get over that wave and feel like I get thrown back by the mentality of you must suspend in schools.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wish people would understand that, and they use restorative practices like you can just do it. And it's really hard. It's hard to change the entire way in which schools have operated for as long as schools have operated.
Yes. And then, have you ever felt tension between what's required by district policy versus what feels right for your students?
Yeah, I mean, I think like, we still have zero tolerance, I think, written in weapons policy. I think that there's just tension anytime I pull out policies. We have resource officers. When you fundamentally think about what is the purpose of schools for learning, policies sometimes support the push out mentality. And they'll, I think, through the lens of safety, which the name of this segment is real because it is leading through tension. It is the thing that keeps me up at night.
Mm-hmm.
And no kid is a throwaway kid, right?
Right.
No kid is that. But the balance all the time of like policy, safety, humanity, learning, there is just inherent tension in that. And so I think the greatest thing that I can do is probably to be aware of that tension and slow down in making decisions and talk with families and talk with kids. We do a lot of risk assessments.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't used to be a practice that was done at the level I see it being done now in school. And so I think slowing down with a kid in a family and saying, like, you did something that was really harmful. We need to make sure you're safe, that the school is safe before we make a decision, is something I think that can help that tension at times.
How do you support your staff in understanding the deeper impacts of exclusionary discipline?
I mean, I talk with them about it. I think staff who've been with me for the last 3 years know that we're working on keeping more kids a part of our community. And that doesn't mean I would jeopardize their safety in
Mm-hmm.
school. And so that requires a level of trust. And there's probably staff, that think I don't do enough. I know that, right? I get feedback twice a year from staff. They don't think I'm hard enough on kids. There's staff that think, we're moving in the right direction and we're seeing kids in all of their humanity in the decisions that we're making. And so I think it's just trying to be as honest and transparent and authentic with staff. It's not easy. Most people, I believe, understand that we can't just kick kids out of school.
Right.
But I think there's also some people that would be okay if that's what we were doing. And so I think I think talking with staff is the best thing that we can do. And then what do you need? And if you have a student in your classroom who really is demonstrating some behavior that you need support with, and that's the biggest thing we can do to support staff is to have them know, we got you. What do you need and how can we support you?
And then the last question of this segment, what does it mean to be a principal who challenges systemic norms while navigating bureaucracy?
It means I'm tired. It's a great question because I think while people are well-intended and they're good people, because everybody likes to I'm a good person, right? That's not in question, but I think really understanding what would need to change in schools for outcomes to be equitable should be at the forefront of every single person's job in school, especially those in the seats with the most power. And while I would say here, I have support, I feel that I have to drive that support. And so what I'd love is for somebody else to drive that support with, right? Is to
Right.
co-pilot that. Or I'd be in a space and I'd go, yep, somebody's actually looking at that through the lens of equity or thinking about those who need the most before they think about just what everybody needs. And so I think, I just think it's a tiring endeavor. It's the right endeavor. I know that. I wonder sometimes how sustainable it is in this big old, pretty harmful system.
Yes. And then so wrapping up our closing, if you could redesign school discipline policies from the ground up, what would they look like? You got a fresh start, fresh building, fresh students, everything fresh. How would you redesign school discipline policies and what would they look like?
I think they'd have students at the center, right? I think if I started a new school, I think I would design how we respond to harm in our community with students, that co-creation of what does it mean to be a community that is restorative while making sure that kids can come to, because there's kids that come to school, right, that don't like sometimes what they see and experience in school. But I think the co-creation of that discipline policy with kids in mind, anytime you ask kids, which I'm thinking about this and I'm I don't even need a new school to do that. Why aren't I doing that right now with some kids? You just gave me probably something to do with kids between now, not to redesign the whole thing, but I think what would they want to see from their peers? What has helped them learn and grow and learn different skills? So I think I'd see definitely grounded in restorative work, understanding, what it means to be a part of a community, co-designing the community work, and then also probably co-designing the response to harm in the community and I would say really with staff and students, which is probably more of a almost probably charter school model, although I've never worked in that, but with still, at the end of the day, we're going to probably have, I don't know if I'm redesigning this, I'm probably going to still have policy, but somewhere that the policy would have the underpinning of restorative practices woven throughout it. And right now that's not there. It reads very student discipline, code of conduct. I think just even how you could rewrite a policy centered in the humanity of kids would probably change. When you look at that policy, you can still have accountability without having harm and punishment and it being punitive.
Yeah. And then what gives you hope when it comes to supporting students who've been pushed to the margins?
I think what gives me hope is there are a ton of examples that come to mind. I can see faces. I know names of kids who've come around to me, but to other staff as well, and said, thank you for not giving up. Kids do grow up. Kids do learn different skills. And kids also, some of them realize this isn't for this place right now and in this time isn't for me. There's rare a situation in my 3 years where the outcome for the kid or the family or the community hasn't been one that, while it may have been embroiled in conflict, hasn't led to something hopeful and positive for the student. And sometimes that is sometimes that is a smaller space. Sometimes that is, maybe this is all too much for you socially right now, and we're going to together help you see that. And you might still not see it, but then when you get to that place or you get to return, you're better because of what's happened as a result of it. And so, like, that gives me hope that kids continue to show resilience, that kids continue to show the ability to learn and grow. Youth of today who can navigate all the social complexities that they have to with AI and social media and, 24/7, everything at their fingertips, that they're still these cool human beings who like make the world better. Like, that just gives me hope all the time. And again, when I lose hope, it's probably time for me to stop doing this. And so I think even those who are pushed the farthest, all kids do respond to a boundary. And I think sometimes things happen to kids without boundaries. And I think if you can help kids see where a boundary is and help them know they've crossed it, but they're welcome to come back, I think that also like is good for kids and gives me hope.
Yeah, that's good. No, I feel like moving to a world, or at least schools that are starting to be a little bit more progressive, I think we're going in the right route, right? And hopefully a lot more schools who still use extraordinary discipline incorporate these practices, right? Where like we drive away from kicking students out for tiny things, talking in class, get out, right? Move away from that into asking why. Like, why? Like, if quiet kid starts being disruptive, why? What's happening, right? Did something happen at school? Right. Yes.
What do you need?
Yes. Like, what happened? Was it at home? Was it at school? If it was at school, what can we as teachers, as principals, do to fix that problem?
To the extent that we can. And I think schools are asked to do an incredible thing that society hasn't figured out, right? Schools are expected to get every student to attend 100% of the time. Schools are expected to hold every kid to, stop every adolescent from vaping. That's the school's responsibility. There's big societal equity driven problems that have become the responsibility of the school. And if you think about that, that can be overwhelming. That could keep a person up at night. But I think at the individual level in a classroom, if I have teachers here who are like, right, I notice you look different today. How are you? What's going on? What can I do in here in this moment? If we all did that one thing, those one things ripple out, then we don't have to talk about solving the whole thing. That gives me hope.
That's good, yes. And then to wrap up today's episode, is there anything you'd like educators, parents, or even students themselves to take away from this conversation?
I would want everybody to stop for a minute and just do their own self-reflection of what does the word discipline mean to you? What do you think about response to behavior? Like understanding your own beliefs around discipline. What should schools look like? What's your relationship with out of school suspension? Do you believe it's a good thing? Why? What's created that belief? Because everything would tell us that it's not good for kids. And yet everybody has their own relationship with discipline and behavior in school. So I would want everybody, and everybody who's listening who's not in schools went to school. So everybody has their own relationship. It's one of the greatest things and the hardest things about public education is like everybody went through it. Most people went through it. A lot of people went through it. And so we all have this experience with it. And until you understand your own, which was, I knew I didn't know enough about restorative practices. I knew that schools didn't train me or give me any. I knew that if it was going to look different, the understanding of what I believed about discipline and what I didn't know, I would need to learn that. And so that's what I would want everybody to start doing, is to have some self-reflection, create their own and critical self-reflection, really understand what you believe about it. And then what do you envision? What do you want it to look like? And what would you need to learn or do different as a result of what you envision?
Yeah, that's good. Well, thank you for being in today's episode, and thanks for your time.
thank you for doing this. This is so awesome. I can't wait just for you to keep going.
Yes.
It's amazing. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you, yes. What we heard today wasn't just about policies or practices, it was about choices. Every disciplinary decision made in a school is a moment of reckoning, and principals, like the one we spoke with today, stand in that moment with incredible power. The power to uplift or to exclude, to support or to sever, to respond with compassion or react with control. It's easy to talk about zero tolerance as a system. It's harder to recognize how that system is built. One hallway, one classroom, one referral at a time. According to the U.S. Department of Education, Black students are suspended and expelled at a rate nearly 3 times higher than white students, and students with disabilities are disproportionately removed from learning spaces for behaviors often rooted in trauma or unmet needs. These patterns are not inevitable. They are the result of policy, practice, and perception. But as we heard today, change doesn't start with a bill or a memo. It begins in the moment when a school leader chooses to see a student not as a threat, but as a whole person. It begins with listening, with reflection, and with courage. So, if you're an educator, an advocate, or simply someone who cares, ask yourself, how do we move from discipline to dignity, from control to connection, from punishment to possibility? I'm Uriel, and this is Classrooms and Jail Cells, where stories challenge systems and empathy becomes action. Until next time, keep listening for the quiet truths. They're the ones that shift everything.